This week, Conflict Zone is in Brussels, where the EU's refugee policy lies in tatters and bitter arguments have broken out among member countries. My guest today is one of the EU Commission's Vice Presidents, Valdis Dombrovskis. Why is his group blaming everybody else for the failed policies instead of coming up with new ones? Valdis Dombrovskis, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Good evening.
Refugees fleeing war are being tear-gassed on Europe's borders. How ashamed does that make you feel?
Well, Commission is very concerned with this situation, and as you know, Commission is throughout this crisis emphasizing the need for coordinated European solution and also for implementation of agreed decisions.
I understand, that wasn't my question. My question is, how ashamed does that make you feel?
Well, this is something which we need to address and something we need to work closely with countries.
So you don't feel any shame about this at all?
Well, as I said, from Commission point of view, we see that this is certainly a problem and something which we need to resolve.
I'm asking from your personal point of view as a human being, not as a title sitting in a chair in the European Commission. Does it make you feel ashamed? What does it say about Europe's values, sticking to its values?
This is something, how I also feel personally, that we need to deal with this problem.
But you're not ashamed of it?
As an institution, it's something what we are dealing with and something we're coming with concrete proposals.
Well, you could have come with concrete proposals much earlier. And the concrete proposals that you put in May to distribute 160,000 refugees around Europe, less than 700 in the last 9 months have been given homes. I mean, that again is something to be ashamed of, isn't it?
That's true. That's a serious problem, and something when I said at the very beginning of the interview, there are 2 points. First is a coordinated solution. Second is implementation of agreed decisions, and agreement on relocation is exactly one of those decisions which needs to be implemented.
Mr. Dombrovskis, none of it's happening.
Well,
they're not choosing unity, European countries, they're choosing sovereignty. It's what free countries do. They're choosing sovereignty. So they're not interested in the policy that you put out last May, and the chances are they won't be very interested in any policies that you put forward in the next month or so.
As you yourself put those questions in the very beginning, that this uncoordinated approach unfortunately leads to the situations which leads to uncomfortable questions.
But you should have consulted them first before you put the policies out there, shouldn't you?
To be very clear, Commission's proposal on relocation and also other proposals which were there on strengthening, for example, Frontex competences and so, are approved by the Council. It means that those are decisions already taken by the member states in accordance to the existing procedures. And once decisions are taken, they have to be implemented. And that's the Commission's position on this.
But they didn't want to do it. The countries didn't want to do it. When you look at the opinion polls, which the European Union takes in great detail, Eurobarometer figures, in 25 countries now, the majority of the population have a negative feeling about immigration from outside the EU. And that hasn't changed much in the last 6, 9 months, 12 months. So you knew that there was going to be huge resistance to these policies, and yet you went along and you just kept pushing them.
The fact is that we are confronted with this refugee crisis and that we need to respond to it. And we cannot just ignore and say that nothing is going on.
But they don't want them. The people in the countries don't want them. In some countries, that negative feeling towards immigrants is overwhelming. In your country, Latvia, 86% of people have a negative feeling towards immigrants from outside the EU. That's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Well, I think EU, and so far it has been also the EU's commitment, very clear, is bound by the international agreements and conventions it's applying, including Geneva Convention. which basically clearly says if the person comes at the EU external border and asks for an asylum, it has to be given a due process. Well,
but you can recite these rules as long as you like, but they're not taking any notice of them, are they? They're not. They're junking international law. They're junking the Geneva Conventions. They're junking unity inside the book. I mean, look at Austria. Well, look at Austria a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they called a summit. They didn't invite the Commission. They didn't invite Greece. They invited 9 Balkan countries, and they came to their own settlement. That's what you have. You can recite the rules, but they're not listening.
Well, I wouldn't entirely agree. If you look at the EU's response, EU is, for example, not practicing pushbacks, which would be...
How do you mean, not practicing pushbacks?
It's not pushing boats back, coming from Turkey, back to the Turkish waters. Some other countries are taking this kind of practice. EU is not applying this kind of practice.
Look at Austria. Austria is only going to take 80 a day. Austria has cut off the flow.
Well, we are now certainly in complicated discussions with the Austrian authorities. But, of course, it's also worth noting that Austria's duty, according to the Dublin regulation, is to process peoples where Austria is the first EU country where the refugees are arriving.
But you keep on reciting the rule book, Commissioner,
because it's important.
Because they're showing they're not interested in the rule book. They're writing their own rules at the moment. And as long as you keep sticking to a rule book that nobody else wants to read, we're not going to get anywhere with this, are we?
Well, that's exactly the problem. If rules are not being observed, that leads us to the problem.
So come out with a new policy.
Us to the uncoordinated responses.
Come out with a new policy. Come up with something new. Come up with something that they can agree on. Isn't that the challenge that the officials in this building, highly paid officials like you, this is the challenge. This is where you're supposed to earn your money, isn't it? By coming up with solutions to difficult problems.
Well, that's exactly what Commission has done. And all the rules I have quoted, including Dublin regulation, are rules agreed by member states. Those are not Commission rules. Those are rules as adopted by EU Council and European Parliament, co-legislators of the EU. So, Commission's task as a guardian of the treaty is to ensure that member states are actually following the rules. If we now say member states are not interested in the rules, then we are in a very difficult situation.
Which is exactly what they've shown. And you're about to lose the Schengen Agreement on free movement. It's already been suspended by 6 countries for 6 months. It's likely to be suspended further for 2 years. There's a very strong chance, isn't there, that it's finished. I mean, former President Sarkozy of France says it's dead. Says Schengen is dead.
No. What Commission...
Is he wrong?
What Commission has said on this, that we are going to rescue Schengen by applying Schengen.
You're going to try. You're going to try. There's no guarantee of success, as you well know, Commissioner. Is there? There's no guarantee of success.
On temporary suspensions, it must be said, member states have right to temporarily reintroduce border controls within Schengen internal borders if there is unusual or extraordinary circumstances. And that's exactly what is happening.
But
and member
Schengen...
states are applying those norms in Schengen which allow for temporary introduction of the border controls.
Yeah, but you don't see them putting Schengen back. Even your boss, Jean-Claude Juncker, says without Schengen, there's no euro. He's come out and said it in January. He said a single currency doesn't make sense if Schengen fails. So you're all preparing for this utter catastrophe where Schengen, your flagship pillar of the European Union, falls apart, and then the euro goes too, doesn't it?
No,
this is what we're facing now, isn't it?
Commission is doing exactly the opposite. We are working to save Schengen, and it's doable. And it's doable within existing rules of the Schengen, which allow for temporary reintroduction of the border controls. It's there in the Schengen rules, which are currently being applied.
You know, Commissioner, you missed an opportunity. The Commission missed a lot of opportunities to put a policy in place 3 or 4 years ago to make this catastrophe go away. Gianni Pittella, who's the leader of the Democrats and Socialists in the European Parliament, he said in January, we're now facing the crumbling of Schengen Because nothing was done 3 to 4 years ago when Greece and Italy were saving people from drowning in the Mediterranean, to the general indifference of all the member states. You had a chance. This is his point. You had a chance to do something 3 or 4 years ago. You saw the way things were going. You saw the gradual increase, not so gradual increase, in the numbers of refugees coming towards Europe. Nothing was done. Nothing was done, except policies were put in place that people didn't want and didn't want to follow.
Well, I also would not agree to this. Also, if you look at the situation 2, 3, 4 years ago, quite major search and rescue operation was actually launched in Mediterranean to ensure that people are not drowning in Mediterranean, that there are possibility to rescue those people, and financial and other form of assistance was provided to countries like Greece and Italy to handle this situation.
Not enough. Not enough.
Of course, now we see that the number of people arriving have dramatically increased, and we need to work simultaneously in a number of directions.
But you would accept there is a refusal to unite behind a common migration policy, isn't there? The policy has been laid out, the countries are refusing it. Greece withdrew its ambassador from Vienna. This is what we've got to. Diplomatic rows on that level. Austria and the Balkan states, as I said, unilaterally cut off the flow of migrants. 4 former Soviet bloc states, led by Poland, another opposition bloc. Everywhere you go, it's north versus south, east versus west. It's not the European Union, it's the European disunion these days, isn't it?
Well,
disunity.
Nobody is denying that we are in a very complicated situation.
It's a bit more than that, isn't it? It's a bit more than very complicated.
If you want. But then, to deal with the situation, it's probably beyond the scope what individual member states can handle. We cannot now just say it's all Greek problem and nobody else should be interested. It is indeed a European...
But you've been blaming Greece a lot. Haven't you been blaming Greece consistently? You blamed everybody else. You blamed the member states. You even blamed the arrogant refugees for daring to suggest where it is they might want to go. You blamed everybody, but you never take any blame yourself, do you, in the Commission?
Well, of course, Commission...
You never accept any blame.
Well, of course, Commission's task is to come with proposals, to come with solutions, and of course...
Workable proposals. Workable.
Workable proposals. But the problem right now is implementation of the proposals. Commission proposals which we are talking about, they were not rejected in a Council. Commission proposals were adopted in a Council by Member States. And then it's only reasonable to expect, to encourage, to work with Member States to ensure that decisions taken by the Member States themselves are actually being implemented. And that is what Commission is pushing for.
Here's the indictment. And it's the indictment on the EU, it's the indictment on the Commission, it's the indictment on the Member States from the United Nations, from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who says that Europe is on the cusp of a largely self-induced humanitarian catastrophe. Self-induced. The largest trading bloc in the world, 500 million people, has self-induced this crisis. That's a terrible indictment, isn't it?
Well, of course we need...
And it's true, isn't it? Well, you're not arguing.
Well, I wouldn't oversimplify. Of course we need to look at root causes of this crisis. And we know that root causes of this crisis is war in Syria, is more general instability in the Middle East and Northern Africa. So it means that it's not only what we do within the EU, and we have our fair share of problems, nobody is denying that, but it's also that we need to deal with
mistakes.
Including mistakes, let's not deny it. But it also needs that we need to deal with the situation as it is in Middle East, Northern Africa, deal with the root causes, have agreements with the third countries, first and foremost Turkey, well, upcoming summit on Turkey. But that's pie in the sky,
Commissioner, to deal with the problems in the Middle East. How are you going to deal with the problems in the Middle East? They're shooting it out. There are 1,000 different militia groups in Syria. How do you suggest dealing with that as part of the problems of the Middle East? It's very easy to say, but the major powers of the world have been wrestling with this now for years and have come up with no solutions whatsoever. Hard enough to get a simple ceasefire in one country, isn't it? Hard enough. And you talk about dealing with these problems.
Well,
this could take 30, 40, 50 years. But what are you going to do about the refugees in the meantime?
Stabilization of the situation can take much shorter than this. And arriving at a ceasefire also can take much shorter than this if there is a political will on all the sides.
But one of the things, one of the mistakes you've been making is to squeeze Greece continually, isn't it? To attack Greece the whole time. Instead of being grateful that they're saving the lives of 2,000 people a day who are turning up inside their country, you keep squeezing them and pushing them and accusing them of seriously neglecting their obligations. Even Angela Merkel has actually said, warning that Greece has been let down by the EU and implying the EU is pushing the country towards chaos.
And
you're pushing them towards chaos, aren't you? She's right.
Let's distinguish two things. One thing is Schengen evaluation report, we can get to this. Another thing is whether there is a coordinated response by the member states.
But I'm talking about your attitude to Greece. Why keep squeezing them? What about when law and order breaks down in that country? As it has, we've seen demonstration, we've seen protests, we've seen strikes continually.
Greece is actually one of the prime recipients of funding, of EU funding to deal with the refugee crisis. And also just this week, Commission adopted also a decision on emergency relief, on emergency aid to deal with the current situation
very small sums of money. Very small sums of money.
Not so very small sums of money.
It's costing them 10 million euros a month.
And the sums of money are also going in tens of millions.
10 million euros a month, are you? You're not funding them to the tune of 10 million euros a month.
Well, we are funding them to the tune of what's there in EU budget for those purposes, and actually have squeezed already pretty much all the reserves which we had there in 2015 and 16. To this point, we have mobilized something on a scale of 10 billion euros to deal with the refugee crisis. To come back to the Schengen evaluation report. Indeed, there was a Schengen evaluation report where serious deficiencies were found, and we are now working, and actually very constructively working with the Greek authorities, and Greek Commissioner Avramopoulos is the one in charge on this.
So why does Angela Merkel think that you're pushing them into chaos?
Well, let's distinguish this another situation.
You have to ease off from Greece.
Yes, and that's why I'm criticizing.
You nearly kicked them out of the euro. You threatened to kick them out of Schengen. They're the poorest member of the EU, and you keep squeezing them. This is hypocritical, isn't it? How many other countries, apart from Germany in the EU, could take in 2,000 refugees a day?
We are jumping from one.
How many?
Sorry to say, we are jumping from one topic to another. But if there was one institution which was constantly, wholeheartedly supporting that Greece stays within euro area and pushing it all the way through till the agreement on the third Greek program was reached, it was European Commission. And it was European Commission President Juncker who was really at the forefront of this battle, and always standing in all the meetings, both publicly and behind the closed doors, that Greece should remain part of the euro area. So, sorry, we cannot take that. Then on Schengen. If there are deficiencies, and there are deficiencies in hotspots, in registration of refugees, on checking them against security databases, it's all very much needed. And if you want a system where functioning system, all elements need to fall in place.
Commissioner, there would be much more money around, wouldn't there, if there wasn't so much wastage in the European Commission itself? In November, just 4 months ago, the Court of Auditors, your independent financial watchdog, cited 6.3 billion euros that have been misspent over the last year. You saw the report.
Well,
you hang your head in shame over this?
Well, as regards Court of Auditors report, this is something which Commission needs to work on, and to work on so-called error rates in the use of EU funds.
Which is double what it should be.
Well,
it's 4.4%. They said, although why they should think that 2.2% is acceptable, it wouldn't be in the private sector. But you're double what's held to be acceptable in the European Union.
It's also then working in which budgetary positions we have the highest error rates. And then we see that those are in the budgetary positions which are in the decentralized managements by the member states.
But the President of the Court says we call for a whole new approach. We cannot afford to do business as usual. So something fundamental has got to change in the way that you manage these financial programs, because there's incompetence on a huge level, isn't there?
Well, I wouldn't agree with this. Commission is really working very hard to reduce those error rates and working very closely with the member states' administrations.
We've been working for years on this. We've had wastage, fraud and mismanagement for
actually,
years.
if you see the error rates, you actually see them clearly going down.
In a report for the European Parliament Budget Control Committee, they criticised, this was in January, they criticised the way development aid is spent, saying half the €23 billion budget is improperly used due to poor management, corruption in recipient countries and misappropriation of funds. That's hardly a vote of confidence in the way you do business, is it?
Well, as regards development aid, as you know, the development aid goes to the poorest, least developed countries. Of course, to expect top-level public administration in countries receiving development aid is
you say just because they're poor, they're corrupt?
No, this means that, of course, we need to follow quite closely how this development aid is being used and make sure that it's not being misspent, but it's worth dealing that.
But the key criticism is that the spending managed directly by the European Commission had the same level of error as that managed jointly or by member states. That doesn't fill anybody with confidence, does it?
There you really need to look closer at the figures.
This is what the Court of Auditors says.
What is in decentralized management, what is it in a centralized management.
And that's what the conclusion they come up with.
Well, on the error rates, what can I say? That the Commission is clearly working to get those error rates down and coordinating it very closely with also supervisors, with Court of Auditors, providing response and proposals how to address the shortcomings found with the Budgetary Control Committee in European Parliament.
A European Union that wants to be a union is facing a British referendum in June. Brexit, British exit, the possibility of British exit. Where's your contingency plan for this?
Well, as regards the UK referendum, we know that heads of state and government has made a deal, reached an agreement to address the concerns raised by Prime Minister Cameron.
I understand, but do you have contingency plans for your second largest economy to leave the trading bloc? Do you have contingency plans for that?
Now the decision is in the hands of British people.
We understand that. That's what I asked about contingency. Do you have contingency planning?
Well, from Commission point of view, and this is also our, if you want, qualitative assessment, of course it makes economically much more sense for the UK and also EU to stay within a European Union.
I understand that. That's not my question. My question was, are you planning for the contingency that Britain may leave the European Union?
Well,
after June.
We were contributing to the solution, which was eventually reached by member states, of ensuring that this would not happen, of ensuring a
yes or
deal
no? Do you have contingency plans? Yes or no?
Well, once again...
I mean, you're supposed to be a transparent organisation. When you took the job, your boss said, I want transparency in this commission. I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you have contingency plans for Britain's departure from the European Union?
Our plan on which we are working, it's a plan A for UK to stay within European Union.
You know, Reuters reported in January that a senior Commission official, maybe it was you, told them there is an internal order not to discuss or study the impact of British exit. And this comes from Jean-Claude Juncker's office. Is this why you can't give me a straight answer? Because you've been told to say absolutely nothing about this?
No, this is because we concentrate, once again, on the Plan A. We concentrate on the work to make sure that UK stays as a part of the EU, which makes much more sense economically, both for UK and for the EU.
So, a level of incredible irresponsibility then in your Commission, that you're coming up to what could be a major watershed event and you are making no contingency plans whatsoever for it. Is that what I can take away from your answers?
What you can take away from the answers, that it's best for EU and UK to remain within the EU.
Valdis Dombrovskis, you've done your best not to answer the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.